What's up, everybody? It's your boy Shane G. We're back with another episode of Politics as Usual right here on the Ethos Media Network. So please continue your support. Definitely appreciate everybody who subscribed in the last month, everybody who's been sharing the videos. So please make sure that you continue to do so. Leave comments, like the videos, share the videos, and please subscribe to the channel. Also, check us out over on Patreon at Ethos Media Network. Now, what we're here to discuss today is Kamala Harris. So she is the Democratic nominee for the president of the United States. Joe Biden dropped out. And there was nobody else that was running against Joe Biden. So they were able to essentially pick who they wanted to be the nominee. There was no, voting process. There was no primary. There was no decision, amongst the people who the nominee would be. The establishment in the Democratic Party selected Kamala Harris, and that's who we got. So, what I want to discuss is her record. So that way, I always feel like if you follow the money and if you look at what they've done in the past, that's the best indicator to figure out what they're going to do in the future. So she's been in politics since, the mid 2000s. And so she has plenty of record for us to go off of when it comes to her being the district attorney in San Francisco, when it comes to her being the attorney general of California, when it comes to her being a senator from California. We have plenty of record, plenty of voting record to go off of here. And we also have plenty of campaign donations and finance resources to go off of here. So that way we can kind of figure out what we think Kamala might do. Kamala, what she might do if she becomes president. And I'll be doing another one of these on Donald Trump as well, based on some of his more recent rhetoric, based on his actions from before when he was the president, and, based on who he has around him, who may influence him in one direction or another. So we're going to do a full breakdown of Trump as well. This video is not really for the vote blue no matter who people. This video is not really for people who don't care about Kamala's record and they're going to vote for her anyway because they despise Trump that much. This isn't for those people. This is for people who are possibly on the fence, who don't like Trump, but they're not sure that they want to vote for Kamala Harris either. This video is for those people to make, hopefully, the information that I provide to you today and present to you today will help you make a decision. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for either way, or to not vote. I'm not here to do that. I'm just here to give you her record. I'm going to try to present it in the fairest way possible, so that way you can get a clear picture of her past and what she's likely to do in the future. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, this is from the Sacramento Bee. Remember, she was the district attorney of San Francisco. So that's the Bay Area. Sacramento is also in the Bay Area, or at least it's in Northern California. I don't know if it's necessarily considered the Bay or not, but it is definitely in Northern California. So, they would be familiar with what she was doing. So let's get into it. This is from Jillian Brazel. So Vice President Kamala Harris's political record and how Republicans will use it against her is center stage now that she's the expected front runner to top the 2024 Democratic ticket. President Joe Biden announced on Sunday that he would drop out of the presidential contest. He then endorsed Harris to be the Democratic nominee in a post on X. My very first decision as the party nominee in 2020 was to pick Kamala Harris as my vice president, Biden wrote, and it's been the best decision I've ever made. Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee for our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Harris's recent talking points as vice president have centered on abortion, more aligned with her mainstay issues before becoming the first woman and Black and South Asian American vice president in January 2021. Harris, 59, was tapped as Biden's vice president in 2020 after running her own short-lived presidential campaign that year. She left the U.S. Senate seat she had since 2017 to join the White House. Prior to that, Harris served as California's Attorney General and the San Francisco District Attorney. Republicans not only see an opportunity to attack Harris's record as vice president, but also dating as far back to her time in San Francisco. And even among Democrats, Harris has been chastised for changing or at least muddling her positions on some issues that will be key to the 2024 race. Here's a look at what those issues might be. Immigration. Biden tapped Harris in March 2021 to lead an effort to ease the root causes of migration from Central America, a national strategy that would improve economic and safety conditions and encourage potential migrants to remain in 3 Central American countries, which were El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. That effort has been mocked by Republicans who dubbed her the border czar, even though immigration analysis contend her work is not really about the southern border. Immigration was not her issue before becoming vice president, said Dan Moraine, a veteran California journalist and author of the biography Kamala's Way. She has been to the border. She has talked about transnational gangs, Moraine said in an interview this month. This was an issue that she talked about as a California attorney general, but it wasn't one of her go-to issues. So basically what he's saying is, and first of all, I want to say right here, that effort has been mocked by Republicans who dubbed her the border czar. Republicans didn't dub her the border czar. That was her title in all of mainstream media when she was first given those responsibilities when she became the vice president. So that's not, I don't know why all of a sudden that became like a thing where people are saying that's a Republican smear and nobody ever said that about her before. That's not true. I watched a video yesterday of repeated ABC hosts, CNN hosts, MSNBC hosts, which are all definitely Democrat-leaning networks, calling her the border czar, and nobody was correcting them, and nobody was saying, hey, why are you using that Republican talking point? Nobody was saying that back then. That was her title, and everybody accepted it. So it's weird that people are making that like a Republican thing now. So I just want to point that out. But so basically what Dan Moraine is saying is that although she has spoken about the border and immigration and things of that nature before, that wasn't her main issue, and that wasn't, her bread and butter. That's not her expertise. So it's interesting that they would make her the border czar or whatever you want to title it to make it less Republican-y, I guess. But, she was in charge of the border. That was her thing when she was vice president. So the White House had said it's on track to meet its goal set in 2021 to give $4 billion to the Central American countries in 4 years, and that Harris's work with the private sector has generated more than $5.2 billion in investments for job creation, internet access, and formal financial systems. So they're saying that she's generated more than $5.2 billion, and they wanted to give $4 billion to those 3 countries. Have they given them the money? If they've already gotten the $4 billion, did they give them that and then they continued raising $1.2 billion more? Or is this one of those things where because it's in the private sector is like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yeah, we're going to do, job creation in Central America and in those 3, countries specifically. We got you, no problem. And then really they just get to keep the money because there's no regulation in place to make sure that happens. Abortion and reproductive health. Harris has traveled the country as far as part of her Fight for Reproductive Freedoms tour this year, talking about abortion access, warning about what a second Trump administration could do to abortion rights, and calling state laws limiting access Trump abortion bans. Since the Supreme Court overturned federal abortion protections set by Roe v. Wade in 2022, Harris has held more than 90 events in 21 states on the issue, the White House said. Without a doubt, women's health issues has been a recurrent issue for her. It's an issue that has come up repeatedly in Harris's career. As California Attorney General and a senator, Harris worked on efforts for women's rights, maternal health, and other related issues. Before Harris became District Attorney of San Francisco, she specialized in prosecuting child sexual assault cases in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. She continued prosecuting domestic violence perpetrators, child abusers, and sex traffickers as chief of the Division on Children and Families at the San Francisco City Attorney's Office. So that's good. Here's my thing, though, about the Democrats, and this is the recurring theme about the Democrats as a whole. That's their biggest issue. The issue with the Democrats is Roe versus Wade happened in the 60s, and nobody codified it into law. They just assumed that it would be that it was a settled debate. But it was never written into the law. So there was always a chance that the Republicans could come back and try to overturn that. At the time that this was a hot button issue a few years ago, this was during the time that the Democrats had a majority in the Senate, had a majority in the House of Representatives, and they had the White House. Why didn't they just codify it in the law right then? So that way it would have been much harder for the Republicans to overturn that law versus just having the Supreme Court say it's up to the states and it's not a federally protected right because it was never written into law. That was a one-time decision that was made that everybody's just used as a precedent. That doesn't make it the law, though. So they had, since the early 70s, late 60s, to make this thing a law. And no administration, there have been plenty of Democratic administrations, and none of them did it. But they all ran on it in the last one, even when they actually had the numbers and the power to make it a law. Why do you think that is? That seems convenient. That seems like one of those things where it's like, if you don't elect us, then then the bad guys are going to do this thing. And it's like, well, you could stop them right now from doing the thing that you're saying is what you want to prevent them from doing. You could do that now. So regardless if they get power or not, the thing's already in the law, but you chose not to do that. So that's going to be a recurring theme with most Democrats as a whole and with Kamala Harris. So yes, she's saying all the right things. She's campaigning and, she's making this a priority in her campaign, which I do think is a good strategy. But the fact that you even have to use it as a strategy when you all had the power to make it a law a long time ago, and you could be running on that saying, hey, we made it a law, so that way these Republicans couldn't take it from you. That's a much better campaign than we have to prevent them from doing this. So I'm the only saving grace in that. No, you could be running on, this is stuff I've done already, and this is what because then there's more of a reason to trust what you say you're going to do in the future if you have a track record of actually doing things. So now the women's rights, going after domestic violence perpetrators, child abuse, sexual, I'm all for that. So that's beautiful. I'm glad that you're actually putting these people away. And that does, lend some credence into you saying that, you want safer conditions for women across the country. So I can buy into that because you do have evidence here that says that you have, actually done things to contribute to the betterment of these situations. So that's good. But the women's health issues thing, like I said, like that one's going to remain kind of iffy for me because, again, y'all could have did this and nobody thought it was important enough, but you found it important enough to run on in 2022 when everybody was trying to keep their Senate seats and, their going after their House of Representatives seats, in Congress. They felt like it was important enough to run on, but not important enough to stop it before it became a problem. That's the issue. Okay, crime, criminal justice, and the death penalty. So throughout her career, Harris promoted herself as a tough-on-crime attorney. At the 2026 Democratic Convention, she told a New York delegation that she was California's top cop, a moniker that many in the state's communities of color criticized. So again, that's not propaganda that she was the top cop. She called herself that at the New York delegation. And at the 2016 Democratic Convention, she told the New York delegation this. So again, not propaganda. She called herself the top cop. When she became a U.S. Senator in 2017, Harris became a leading voice in a bid to reform the nation's criminal justice system, notably after George Floyd was killed by a police officer in Minneapolis in 2020. The White House told the Bee this month that Harris spent her career trying to reduce recidivism, help people rebuild after prison, and improve children's civil rights in the juvenile justice system. Harris's 2019 presidential campaign platform included seeking a federal moratorium on the death penalty, which she has long opposed. All of that is good. And I actually have some information regarding her reducing recidivism in California, because there is sort of a misnomer about certain things that she did in California. Now, we'll get to the bad parts eventually as well, but I do want to mention that, there was a program that she implemented in 2005, I believe, that allowed low-level drug offenders, rather than, going to jail or, having it on their record, where they could go to school, and as long as they graduated from school, it would essentially get expunged from their record. So not only did that reduce recidivism, but it also provided job opportunities to a lot of, youth who otherwise would have had drug charges on their record. So I do want to mention that was also a very good thing that she did. And being opposed to the death penalty is always good, in my opinion. So yeah, that's another good move. She was embroiled in controversy as a San Francisco prosecutor when she would not seek the death penalty against a suspect accused of killing a police officer. When she ran for attorney general in 2010, many in the law enforcement area opposed her. 4 years later, after a federal judge ruled California's death penalty unconstitutional, Harris appealed the decision. It is not supported by the law, and it undermines important protections that our courts provide to defendants, she said at the time. So I'm not really sure. So did she change her mind on the death penalty? She appealed the decision after the federal judge ruled that California's death penalty was unconstitutional. But she was embroiled in controversy as a prosecutor when she would not seek the death penalty against a suspect accused of killing a police officer. So I don't know. That one's a little confusing, how that's written. So we'll have to do a little bit more of a deep dive in a little bit. Soon after joining the Senate, Harris publicly supported the Medicare for All plan that Bernie Sanders had reiterated that view 2 years later when she started her own presidential run. I believe the solution, and I actually feel very strongly about this, is that we need to have Medicare for all. She said that on CNN. In June, during the Democrats' first debate, Harris raised her hand when moderator Lester Holt asked who here would abolish their health insurance in favor of a government-run plan. But after the debate, Harris said she misinterpreted the question. She said her vision includes private insurance where people can have supplemental insurance. So she's sort of speaking about the Australian model, where it's like everyone has base level insurance, but if you want supplemental insurance on top of that, you can get it from a private company, which is not a bad plan. It's way better than what we have now. That's essentially a step up from the public option, which is healthcare that you can purchase from the government, which is there to compete with private companies. It's supposed to be there as a way to keep the prices in check, because if you can buy things from the government that are just significantly cheaper than what private corporations are selling them for, then of course everyone's going to buy them from the government. So it's really a way essentially to keep the private companies' prices in check, because they're not going to go too much higher than what the government would. But some people, they have that name brand thing. They'd rather buy Tylenol than the government version, so. In June, I already read that. A month later, she wrote in a post on Medium, "We will allow private insurers to offer Medicare plans as part of this system and adhere to strict Medicare requirements on costs and benefits." Marijuana legalization. Harris opposed a 2010 California ballot initiative to legalize weed, but as part of her criminal justice reform package in 2019, she had a different view. It is past time to end the failed war on drugs, and it begins with legalizing marijuana. But why didn't you agree with that in 2010? Like, 2010 wasn't that long ago when it comes to the weed legalization conversation, right? The conversation was happening in 2010, especially in California. Like, that conversation, like, people knew already that weed didn't have any negative effects and that getting in trouble legally for it made no sense. Everyone already understood that. Everyone understood that in 2010, for sure. So the fact that you opposed that ballot initiative in 2010, but then you campaign on it in 2019 when it's popular to do so, that I don't know how you really feel about it now. Because when there was a time where you could have did something, did something about it, you didn't. But when it was time to talk about it, when you didn't really have a stake in it, all of a sudden it's past time to end the failed war on drugs and begins with legalizing marijuana. I agree with the statement, but I don't know if you really feel that way. That's the problem. The Biden administration started the federal process of rescheduling weed from the most tightly regulated Schedule 1 to less regulated Schedule 3 in May. At a White House event in March, Harris reiterated a position she's held recently. Nobody should have to go to jail for smoking weed. I agree, but you shouldn't be on probation for it either. You shouldn't have to pay any fines for it either. You should just be able to do it, no problem. Like, that's sort of a misnomer when you say nobody should have to go to jail for smoking weed. It's like, of course. Like, but you're probably still, you know what I mean? Like, that leaves open a lot. So just keep that in mind. So yeah, that's her important record. This is from Jillian Brazel. And this is from the Sacramento Bee, again, a magazine that would be, a newspaper that would be pretty familiar with her record. So let's continue. Let's look up a little bit more about Kamala's record. Let's actually look at her voting record. Okay, so we're going to look at her voting record. So this vote was from January 1st, 2021. To authorize appropriations for fiscal year 2021 for military activities of the Department of Defense, for military construction, and for defense activities of the Department of Energy to prescribe military personnel strengths for such fiscal year and other purposes. Now, mind you, our military budget is over $700 billion per year. How did she vote on this one? Let's see. Kamala Harris voted yes. She voted yes to pass that military budget, which again is over $700 billion per year. So that's not good. That is not a good vote. Now, if you notice, the majority of the Democrats voted yes. Bernie Sanders voted no. Good on him. The majority of Cory Booker voted no. Good for him. Elizabeth Warren voted no. Good for her. But yeah, every other Democrat, they voted yes for it, including Kamala Harris. So she's good with the military budget being $700 billion. Just so we're clear, that's what that means. Okay, the next one we're going to look at here is her Social Security vote. So this was on December the 2nd of 2020, or December the 2nd, 2020. A bill to amend Title II of the Social Security Act to eliminate the 5-month waiting period for disability insurance benefits under such title for individuals with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. So this is a very specific bill, but what it's saying is if you have this condition, then there was a 5-month waiting period in which you're able to get your disability insurance. And so the bill is basically saying, no, we're going to cut that waiting period out. If you have this issue, you get your insurance, right away or whatever, in a much more short amount of time. I'm not sure if it's right away, but you don't have to wait 5 months. So again, let's see how Kamala Harris voted on this one. She was absent this day. She did not vote. Okay. I thought I had a vote for her on this day, but she didn't vote for that one. So, okay, lucky her. I wonder how she would have voted. I am curious how she would have voted on that one. We'll see. Okay, now this one was a bill to condemn gross human rights violations of ethnic Turkish Muslims in Xinjiang and calling for an end to arbitrary detention, torture, and harassment of these communities inside and outside of China. So basically, this is a bill saying, hey, we should try to encourage China to stop, terrorizing their Turkish Muslim population, because that's essentially what's happening. Like the Israel-Palestine situation, where the Israelis are terrorizing the Palestinians, same thing's been going on in China for quite a while, actually, where Chinese are terrorizing the Turkish Muslims. So this was a bill basically saying that we would encourage China to stop doing this inside and outside of China. Kamala Harris was absent for this vote. Okay. I think I know how she would have voted on this one based on other votes that we'll come across, but We'll see. All right. Um, it's actually really hard to follow her record because she was absent for a lot of votes, it seems like. So I don't know what she was doing. Maybe this was around the time she was campaigning for president or something, but there's a lot of votes that she missed as senator for like important stuff, like not the judges. And she voted on all of that stuff. I was able to find a lot of that stuff for her where she was voting yes or no on judge appointments and, things like that. But when it comes to like really important issues, it seems like her name comes up absent a lot. So that's also troubling. But let's continue to look. So on this one, to reduce the bloated Pentagon budget by 10% and invest that money in jobs, education, healthcare, and housing in communities in the United States in which the poverty rate is not less than 25%. So they're basically saying they want to take 10% of the Pentagon budget, which again is over $700 billion, take 10% of that money, which is just $70 billion, and invest it in jobs, education, healthcare, and housing in the communities in which the poverty rate is not less than 25%. So that means if a quarter or more of the population in this specific community has a poverty rate which is higher than 25%, I'm sorry, if the poverty rate is higher than 25% in specific communities, then those communities would have been serviced by this $70 billion that they would have taken out of the already $700 billion military budget that, once again, I must reiterate, Kamala voted for. So let's see how she voted this time. We see a bunch of Republicans said, no, we're not doing that. So let's see, the Democrats are supposed to be better than the Republicans, right? They want to help people and, Republicans want war and all of that, but Democrats, they're better, right? So let's see. Kamala Harris, how'd you vote? She voted no. She voted with the Republicans on this one. That's interesting. Bernie Sanders voted yes. Elizabeth Warren voted yes. Cory Booker voted yes. Interesting. Kamala Harris voted no. So she wants us to continue to spend the money in the military. She doesn't want to invest any of that money back into the United States. So keep this in mind. She had a chance to vote to say, let's reinvest some of that war money back into the United States and help the poor communities here. And she said, no, I want to continue to spend that money in the actual military. Okay, so if you hear her say, I want to end the wars and I want to reinvest the money back in the United States, that way, if you hear her say that, just remember that when she had an opportunity to do that, she chose not to. Okay. All right. So now, a bill to improve and reform policing practices, accountability, and transparency. You know what that means? That means cameras. That means independent investigations outside of the police department. They can't investigate themselves. That means there would be a third party to do it. That's what that means. So how do you think, before we even get to it, Kamala, top cop, self-proclaimed top cop Harris, how do you think she voted on this? All we want to do is be able to hold police accountable and have a little bit more transparency so we can actually know what's going on with the police. How do you think Kamala Harris voted? Kamala Harris voted no on this. Voted nay. You see that? Kamala Harris voted no on this. She did not want more accountability and transparency when the police do things. She likes it the way it is. So if you ever hear her say, we're going to do things to help Black communities when it comes to their relationships with the police, Black Lives Matter, I believe in defund the police. If you hear her say any of that, her voting record says otherwise. This is what matters. This is what they're doing. This is their actions. This is not their words. This is not what they're saying. This is what they're doing, the voting record. And her voting record says that she doesn't want to change how policing is in America. So just keep that in mind. Okay. To the next one, we have this is a bill to amend the Foreign Intelligence Service Act of 1978 to prohibit the use of authorities under such act to surveil United States persons and to prohibit the use of information acquired under such act in any criminal, civil, or administrative proceeding or as part of any criminal, civil, or administrative investigation and for other purposes. So basically, what this means is the United States is allowed to just surveil its citizens. They're allowed to read all of your texts, your emails, listen to all of your phone calls, etc. Any sort of communication that you do, the United States is allowed by this act, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978, to spy on you to see if you're tied to any foreign entities, essentially. So if they suspect you, like let's say I got people over in Africa. I do have family members that are from Africa. So let's use that as an example. Let's say my aunt from Malawi is, I don't know, has ties to people who are doing terrorist things over in Malawi, right? Let's just say that, for example. And because I go to Thanksgiving over at my aunt's house and, a few holidays here and there throughout the year, now the United States feels like they can surveil me and listen to every phone call that I make to everyone that I make it to, every text message, every email exchange, every Facebook, every tweet, all of that. Because I'm related to somebody who's related to some people who may or may not be doing something across the world. That's what this means, just so that everyone is clear on, because they use a lot of tricky language in that, but that's what that means. So let's see. Do we think that's a good thing? First of all, I say no. I don't want to be spied on because of something that anybody else is doing that I'm not a part of. How did Kamala Harris vote on this? She voted no. She voted against that. She voted against amending this bill, which changes it to prohibit the use of authorities to surveil United States persons. She voted against that. She wants the ability to be able to spy on United States citizens. That's what this means. Just, again, so that we're clear. That's what this means. So take that information and do what you will with it. But that's the fact of the matter. She wants the ability to be able to spy on everybody, according to her voting record. So let's continue. So this one is a bill that would be a joint resolution to direct the removal of United States armed forces from hostilities against the Islamic Republic of Iran that have not been authorized by Congress. So essentially what that means is, Congress is supposed to be the ones that declare war. The president can't just unilaterally decide, we're going to war and just do it. That takes a vote in Congress. It's supposed to anyway. So what this bill would be saying is, hey, if we have troops in Iran, Congress didn't ever sanction that. We're not at war with Iran. So therefore, we need to remove all of the armed forces from Iran because we never authorized that by Congress. So this bill would accomplish that and would get all of those troops home who are in Iran, who are not there under the authority of Congress. So again, this is a vote to remove those soldiers from Iran, which were not supposed to be there anyway. How did Kamala Harris vote? Kamala Harris voted yes on this one. That's a good vote. That's a good vote right there, Kamala. Yes, we need to be removing all of the troops, really, from all of these foreign conflicts. But if it's not sanctioned by Congress, especially, there's no reason to be there. So I'm glad that I'm happy I saw that vote. That's a good vote. That's a good vote. So let's see how she did on this one. Let's see if we can get two in a row, Kamala. Let's go. So this one was to ensure that additional unemployment benefits do not result in an individual receiving unemployment compensation that is more than the amount of wages the individual was earning prior to becoming unemployed. So basically what that means is let's take Arizona, for example. You get about $216 per week in unemployment benefits. That's the max unemployment benefits that you get. $216 a week. Okay. So if you were at a job and you made $200 a week, this bill would prevent you from getting that extra $16. This means that if you were so poor as to you were making less than $216 a week, that if you got an unemployment, you wouldn't theoretically be making more on unemployment than you would be at your job, which we've already established would be less than $216 a week. I just want you to think about that in your life. Could you make $216 a week work? Could you pay your rent off of that and then buy groceries and buy toilet paper, buy soap? You'd be able to do all of that off of $216 a week? If so, please tell me how you budget and like what your budgeting is like, because that's amazing. And I need to figure out what you're doing. Maybe you're a super couponer. I don't know. I don't know what it would be, but that's amazing if you're able to live in 2024 off of $216 a week. That's incredible. But for, most people I know that's not even feasible. Most of the time, $216 a week doesn't even cover half of my rent. So, I don't know how that will work, but so essentially this is basically saying you cannot make more on unemployment than you did at your job. Well, I can tell you how to fix that. How you fix that is you raise wages with the jobs, because then there would be no incentive to not work and get $216 a week, because you know for sure that if you worked full time, you would definitely get more than $216 a week, because the wages would be high enough to sustain that. You guys have to remember the minimum wage is still only $7.25 an hour. Still. And I know a lot of people like to say, oh, well, what about struggling mom and pop businesses that are not able to afford to pay employees like that? Why do they get to have a living wage, but their employees don't? Because they own the business. That gives them the right to be the only ones within that business that deserve a living wage? I don't think so, because they need the employees to make the business run. So you should probably figure out a good balance of employees and your payouts, so that way you can remain profitable, but maybe you're going to have to do more shifts. Maybe you're going to have to be a owner/worker. That might have to be the situation, but your employees deserve a living wage for allowing you to have a living wage, because without those employees, you don't have your business, and then you don't have a living wage. So that's how it all fits together, and that's how it should work in my mind. I feel like that's a reasonable take. So if you raise the wages, if you tie the wages to inflation directly, then you won't have to worry about banning via legislation unemployment compensation being higher than what you made. So I just said a lot right there. Let's see how Kamala voted on this. Is she in favor of banning unemployment benefits being more than what you made at your job? Harris votes no on this one. So that's a good vote. That's a good vote. Good job, Kamala. Good job. We got 2 in a row there. Solid votes. Solid votes. That's a good one. That's a good one. All right. Moving on, we have a bill here to strike federally mandated sick pay and paid family leave and replace it with financial support provided through state-administered unemployment insurance systems and funds. So this is basically saying, because obviously corporations, there's federally mandated sick pay, meaning, if you get sick, there's a certain amount of hours that your job has to provide you in, time off where you would still get paid even though you're sick. Paid family leave, same thing. That's like if a woman has a baby, she gets maternity leave, things like that. So this is saying, should we keep that system, or should we replace it with a financial support provided through the state, which would be the government, administered unemployment insurance systems and funds? Kamala voted no on this one, which I agree with. I don't really see a reason to do that. We already get sick time, so I think it's fine. You know what I mean? I don't, now If you're talking about the railroad workers or something like that, then that's a different issue. But this didn't specifically say it was tied to them. So I think this is just in general. So yeah, I don't really have an issue with that vote. All right. So this bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to require a social security number for the purposes of the child tax credit, to provide the president the authority to transfer funds as necessary, and to terminate United States military operations and reconstruction activities in Afghanistan. So there's a lot tied together there. So that's sort of that's what a lot of people in Congress do when they write these bills, and they sort of do it in a way so that way what happens is you can pick out what part of that any particular person may have voted for or against and attack them on that point because there's so much there. So Social Security, you're required to have a Social Security number for the purposes of the child tax credit. That makes sense to me. That proves you're a citizen. So yes, you have to have a Social Security number to show that you have children within the United States, or, like a tax ID, whatever the equivalent is for, non-citizens who are allowed to live here. To provide the president the authority to transfer funds as necessary. Okay. So it's not really saying in what capacity that means. So that could be where where certain people's votes came in. And to terminate United States military operations and reconstruction activities in Afghanistan. See, now the fact that they put that on there is the bait and switch, right? So the child tax credit, Social Security number, that's one issue. Provide the president the authority to transfer funds as necessary. That's a gray area because I don't know what that means. Is that for Social Security? Is that giving more money for the child tax credit? What does that mean? And then to terminate United States military operations and reconstruction activities in Afghanistan. Of course, everyone wants to do that, but nobody wanted to vote against the first part, the Social Security number for, you see what I'm saying? So it makes it a confusing vote. But let's see what happened here. Kamala voted no, but she's locked up with all the Democrats and the majority of the Republicans as well. So apparently nobody wanted to do this. So yeah, I think everybody had a different reason to vote no on this one. So that one's kind of a wash. It's a little bit harder to determine, whether or not that was a good or bad vote. And the last vote that we're going to go over here is a bill to provide Americans with paid sick time and paid leave so that they can address their own health needs and the health needs of their family. This is on March 18th of 2020. What was going on then? So Kamala Harris voted yes on this one. Another good vote. Good job. Good job, Kamala. So when it comes to healthcare, I would actually say her voting record is pretty decent. Her record is pretty decent when it comes to healthcare specifically. And she had she, like I said, the biggest thing that kind of was a alarm for me was a lot of those big important votes. Now, again, it could have been coincided with when she was running for president. So I am willing to kind of look past it a little bit. But there were a lot of important votes that it seems like she missed. So I actually had to skip a lot of the links that I actually had because, her name kept coming up as absent on a lot of things. And it's like, okay, are you doing that out of convenience so you don't have to, stand on what you vote on? If you vote in a way that progressives and lefties will like, the establishment won't like it. So that's sort of your way of protecting yourself so you can still say progressive stuff, but not actually have to do it and not actually have to stand on it. Is that what that was? Or does it just happen to coincide with when you were running for president? Like, I really, so there's a few questions there still. But next, what I want to get into is some of the criticisms of Kamala Harris, because I think, again, going through her voting record, I feel like I was fair and, I just look at what her record is and then give you my opinion in whether or not I thought it was, a vote that lefties and progressives would like, and people, who are unsure but don't like Trump, so that's her record, and you can decide for yourself whether or not that's a good or bad voting record. I can say for sure, specifically when it comes to healthcare, she has a pretty good voting record, which is very important. So Take with that what you will. Now, just one other thing that I want to give her credit for actually is, again, referencing the Back on Track program, which was implemented, in the the mid 2000s. So before we get to her prosecution record and some of the things that she's heavily criticized for, rightfully so, in my opinion, let's look at like I said, one of the good things about her record when she was the attorney general in California. So I'm sorry, this is when she was the district attorney of San Francisco. So she increased convictions for drug sellers from 56% in 2003 to 74% in 2008. At the same time, Harris also implemented the Back on Track program, which provided nonviolent offenders, many of whom were low-level drug dealers, with the chance to receive a high school diploma, job training, and access to available work instead of prison sentences. So I do want to give her credit on that, because that's very important as well, because that's one of the things that we always say. There's not really options for people who get in trouble or who make a mistake. There was an option for at least low-level nonviolent offenders, which is a good thing. Now, again, we are going to have to get into the other side of her record, though. So, actually, Tulsi Gabbard kind of did the best breakdown of all of it. So we're just going to watch that video, and then we'll get into a couple more articles. All right. And just to, before we watch this clip, that was an NBC article. And again, NBC, not a super Republican, publication at all. Right. So again, these are, Democratic leaning publications that are saying these things. This is on CNN, and this is, in my opinion, what I think completely destroyed Kamala's campaign the first go around.
Congresswoman Gabbard, you took issue with Senator Harris confronting Vice President Biden at the last debate. You called it a, quote, false accusation that Joe Biden is a racist. What's your response?
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting Black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Harris, your response?
Yeah, that kind of did it for her. So, oh man, that kind of did it for Kamala in the first go round, because here's the thing. Literally every single word of that Tulsi Gabbard.
Conjure a world beyond your wildest imagination with multiplayer battles and virtual realms, if you will.
Every single piece. So, when you don't have a defense for that, and when you don't have an explanation for that, why would you keep people in bars longer than they're supposed to be? Why would the government of California have to sue you and make you release prisoners? On 2 different occasions, I believe that actually happened. So it's not about, oh, she was just locking up people who were doing crimes and people are mad at her for it. It's not that. It's everything that Tulsi Gabbard just said right there. That this clip circulates every time Kamala's name is in the news, or it's floated that she's, running for president or anything like that, because people, a lot of times when you hate somebody so bad, like people hate Trump, it'll make you ignore the negative things about the person, that's representing your side, quote unquote. Well, I don't think you should do that. I think that's not good strategy, because that's how you end up getting a Donald Trump, is because you think somebody's a lot better than they actually are. And then what ends up happening is they disappoint you. And then you go all the way in the opposite direction and try to see if that works. And then that doesn't. So that's the issue. But anyway, what I'm going to bring up now is open secrets, because you know me, I like to find out where the money is coming from, and let's see if any of this makes sense. All right, so when she was running for president in 2020, let's see where the majority of her money came from, and let's see if we can make that make sense as far as some of her decisions. So number one was just retired people. She got $4.9 million from them. Number two, lawyers and law firms. That seems to make sense. Lawyers and law firms gave her $3 million. So how do we think that's going to affect her policing? Comparing this with her voting record and comparing this with her prosecution record in California. Number two donating group is lawyers and law firms. Just you know, if there's a connection there, you know, then maybe that's something to think about. Just saying. Number three, education. Number four, TV, movies, and music. Number five, business services, 1.2 million. Number six, securities and investment, 1 million. Number seven, health professionals, 1 million. Number eight, civil servants, public officials. That would be like, you know, judges and people who work for the courts. Tied in with that lawyer thing a little bit. Another 1 million. Okay. So there's a lot of money there that's coming from, you know, civil servants, public officials, lawyers, law firms. So people who are affiliated with the court system. A lot of money coming from there. Now, why do you think they're giving her so much money? Do you think it's because she understands how the private prison industry works, and they need their money and they need people in those beds in order for them to get their money? And she's called herself the top cop, and she says she's going to be a prosecutor president. I mean, I don't know if I can spell it out any clearer without just flat out saying it, but I'm, again, trying to be fair, so I'm going to let you come to your own conclusion on that one. See, everything else is chump change. Even pharmaceuticals. See, that's probably why she's able to vote the way she does when it comes to healthcare, because they don't give her very much money in the pharmaceutical and health product industry. She got a little bit over $250,000 from them. So that's not really enough to lobby her in one direction or another. However, when you get in the millions, yeah, that's a little bit, that's going to get you a little bit more sway. 3.9 or 3 million, 3,029,201. Yeah, that's enough to be able to, you know, get a favor or two, you know, if you're lobbying for somebody. So just want you to always know where the money comes from, because that's the easiest predictor as well. Your voting record in your past and who you're getting your money from. Those are the two easiest ways to figure out how a candidate is going to act. So we want to know also how she's going to behave when it comes to foreign policy, war, things like that, right? So let's see. By clasping hands with Netanyahu, top cop Kamala Harris is whitewashing Israel's racism. So this is from the Gray Zone. A friendly meeting California Senator and self-declared top cop Kamala Harris held with Israel's right-wing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu shows she is more than willing to throw anti-racism and Palestinians under the bus. As the second black female senator in American history, Kamala Harris has been a pioneer in American politics. Many considered her to be a serious contender for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2020. Harris was even branded by the New York Times as a top cop in the era of Black Lives Matter, a tip of the hat to the former California Attorney General's progressive politics and support for social justice issues. But while the senator has been praised as someone who fights racism in the United States, some critics feel she has failed to be consistent in that approach abroad. On November 20th, 2017, Harris met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In the meeting, Harris ignored the avalanche of officially sanctioned anti-Black racism in Israel, turned her back on historic Black solidarity with the Palestinian cause, and ignored the human rights demands of Palestinians living under apartheid. Harris revealed herself as the latest on the long lines of progressives except for Palestine, and one of the most egregious examples given her personal and political background. There's a picture of them kicking it. The day before Netanyahu's meeting with Harris, the Israeli prime minister announced a plan to expel 40,000 non-Jewish African immigrants, branding the asylum seekers as infiltrators whose existence poses a threat to Israel's Jewish character. And this is her homie. This came years after anti-Black protests in Israel, where politicians across the political spectrum, including those in Netanyahu's party, made statements referring to African immigrants as a cancer who emit a bad stench and are likely to cause all kinds of diseases. So this is her homie. This is who she's cool with. And this is important because, again, if we want to know how she's going to behave as president, we need to know what she's done in the past. And in the past, she's covered up a lot of, his crimes through, they call it whitewashing. That's a funny term to use in this case, I guess. But, she's Americanizing and just trying to humanize him so that way people don't think he's as bad of a monster as he is, even though he does everything that you say you're against when it comes to America. So are you only against American blacks and American browns being, treated as second-class citizens, or are you against that concept on a worldwide scale? Because if so, then you should be condemning the actions of Benjamin Netanyahu not taking smiling photographs with him. For over half a century, Black Americans have stood in solidarity with Palestinian struggle against Israeli occupation. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the Black Panther Party, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference were all groups that consistently stood in solidarity with the Palestinian cause. Malcolm X, Angela Davis, and Stokely Carmichael were passionate opponents of Zionism, and James Baldwin famously wrote, "The state of Israel was not created for the salvation of Jews. It was created for the salvation of Western interests." In present day, Black intellectuals such as Michelle Alexander, Eddie Glaude, Alice Walker, and Cornel West have all endorsed a movement of boycott, divestment, and sanctions, or BDS, to pressure the state of Israel to comply with international human rights and conventions. West has referred to the dire humanitarian crisis in Gaza as the hood on steroids. Athlete Colin Kaepernick endorsed the BDS movement. The Movement for Black Lives Matter platform supported the BDS movement and condemned Israel as an apartheid state. Black Lives Matter activists have been taking yearly solidarity trips to Palestine since 2014. In 2017, a trip included rapper Vic Mensa, who subsequently toured with Jay-Z. Black artists such as Snoop Dogg, Future, and Lauryn Hill have all refused to perform in Israel in cooperation with the BDS movement's call for the cultural boycott of Israel. So it seems like Black people in America are in solidarity with the Palestinians, but yet Kamala Harris, the homie. So again, these are just things to keep in mind. If you want the Israel-Palestine conflict to come to an end, I'm sorry. In all likelihood, that is not going to happen under Kamala Harris as president. Seems like we're going to be doing the same thing. And here's ABC once again, Kamala Harris on foreign policy, her experience and where she stands. And this is specifically ABC from, again, Northern California, from Fresno. Fresno, I believe, is Northern California. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure it is, though. Now that she's running for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination, here's a closer look at where Vice President Kamala Harris stands on foreign policy issues and what her experience has been so far. Israel. Let's start right off the bat. In the wake of October 7th, Hamas's attack on Israel, Harris was initially a strong supporter of Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas, knocking down a suggestion that the Biden administration might condition aid to the country in November, saying we are not going to create any conditions on the support that we are giving Israel to defend itself. But by December, so that's flat out just, yeah, Israel, do what you want. That's what that means. But by December, Harris began wading deeper into Middle Eastern diplomacy during a trip to Dubai for United Nations Climate Conference, where she also met with leaders from the region. She took a more forceful tone with Israel than many other senior administration officials had done at the time, declaring too many innocent Palestinians have been killed and saying the administration believes Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. In a March address in Selma, Alabama, marking the anniversary of Bloody Sunday, Harris called out Israel again, saying its government must do more to significantly increase the flow of aid, no excuses, and calling on Israel to open border crossings and ensure humanitarian workers are not targeted. In an interview published earlier this month, Harris said young Americans protesting the war in Gaza are showing exactly what the human emotion should be, and that while she absolutely rejects some of their statements, she understands the emotion behind it. So she's still doing this middle ground thing. She's still doing the whole, I get where they're coming from, but ultimately they shouldn't say that stuff. And, so it's like you're still trying to do the both sides thing. That's really what this is. So. Harris doesn't have a long-standing relationship with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as President Biden does, but she met with Israel's Benny Gantz at the White House while he was serving on the country's war cabinet in March, and met with Israeli President Herzog earlier this year on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. Harris did not travel to Israel as vice president. She has made 2 trips to the Middle East as vice president during visiting the UAE both times, the United Arab Emirates. Doug Emhoff, her husband, is the first Jewish spouse at the White House. Okay, so again, rhetorically, she's saying closer to the right thing. She's saying more of the right thing, but she's still trying to do the middle ground dance of, we need to slow down what's going on in Palestine, but she's not calling for an end to it. Because she's still doing the whole, Israel has a right to defend itself thing. And it's like, yeah, but again, I've used this example before. If I slap a member of your family and then you come back and you murder everybody I know, that is not equal. You know what I'm saying? And that's not justified at that point. And that's not self-defense at that point. That's going way beyond self-defense. Even if I kill you, if I kill one person, if I kill you, just whoever you are listening to this, if I kill you as an individual, it doesn't give someone in your family the right to then come murder my entire family, all of my friends, and all my coworkers. That's not self-defense. That's not. So Harris has been in lockstep with President Biden on Ukraine and vowed to support its fight against Russia for as long as it takes earlier this year. So instantly, that's already bad. That's bad. So that's both wars that we're currently, the most engaged in, and she is in support of both of them from what it seems like. Because again, she didn't say anything about ending the war when it comes to Israel. She said that Israel needs to slow down on killing innocent people. That's it. That's really weak rhetoric, actually. So, and that's the first thing Harris has been in lockstep with President Biden on Ukraine and vowed to support its fight against Russia for as long as it takes earlier this year. We don't even need to read more. Russia. Harris has adamantly supported NATO and said the U.S. will never retreat from its obligations to the alliance. Our commitment to build and sustain alliances has helped America become the most powerful and prosperous country in the world. To put all that to risk would be foolish. She also said the death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny is in a penal colony was a further sign of Putin's brutality. Again, you're not trying to end any of these wars. You don't want a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. You're saying that we're going to keep fighting Ukraine or Russia. China. 4 of Harris's 17 trips abroad have been to East Asia, and she's visited 7 countries as well as the DMZ between North and South Korea. While in office during this trip, she's emphasized curbing China's influence in the region and sought to promote a safe and secure Indo-Pacific. So that's war rhetoric with China. As vice president, Harris has been critical of China's actions in the South China Sea, accusing the country of bullying. She has also said while the U.S. does not invite conflict with China, we are absolutely prepared to and engaged in what is necessary to compete. That's war rhetoric, guys. That's war rhetoric. During the first months of her vice presidency, Harris was assigned with addressing the root causes of irregular migration through the U.S.-Mexico border. Administration and campaign officials say Republicans have strongly tried to brand her as Biden's border czar. Again, everyone was saying that at the beginning. I hate when they do that, because then that makes it seem like me, when I say something true, it makes it seem like I'm somehow Republican. No, I'm calling her what everyone in the media called her when she first got the job and when she told all those people from Central America, don't come. Remember that? Remember that when she was like, hey, to everyone who's trying to come to America through Mexico and Central America, don't come. Remember that? That was her. She was consistently being called the border czar at that point, and nobody said it was racist or Republican or whatever they're trying to infer by that. While Harris has courted investments from the private sector to support communities in Central America, she has been criticized for what some see as a lack of engagement. As VP, she has traveled to the region only twice, spending 3 days on a trip to Guatemala and Mexico in 2021 and spending a day in Honduras in 2022. She's visited the border city of El Paso, Texas in June 2021. So foreign policy, not great. Yeah, not great. Not great. So not looking forward to a Kamala presidency, or a Kamala presidency, excuse me, a Kamala presidency when it comes to foreign policy. It seems like we're going to be spending just as much money overseas as we are now. And again, her voting record going back earlier in this video proves that she will vote against cutting down the military budget in favor of giving that money to United States citizens. So, and this is the last one, because I just found this really interesting. This is actually a high school news article. This is from the Redwood Bark, which is in the San Francisco area. This is from a high school student, and I just feel like this is a really well-written article, because this was written in 2021, so this was written 3 years ago, and this was written 3 years ago, and so we it's an interesting thing to see what the young people feel about her, because again, I'm 37. So to see what young people who were in high school the first time she ran for president, what they think about her, this is probably a good indicator of how people are going to vote this time around, because all of those people who were in high school, you know, in 2020, a lot of them are old enough to vote in 2024. So this is the interesting take on it. So shout out to Alex Fish from the Redwood Bark. On January 20th, Kamala Harris was sworn in as Vice President of the United States, becoming the first woman and person of African American and Southeast Asian descent to do so. Undoubtedly, this is a historic achievement and one that should be recognized when analyzing her legacy. Harris has branded herself as a deeply progressive senator, with the nonpartisan government track organization rating Harris as the most liberal U.S. senator. Throughout her career as senator, she has supported legislation to end cash bail. That's a good thing. Legalize marijuana. That's a good thing. And pursue prison reforms. However, her legacy is also filled with decisions that have not been consistent with this progressive branding. Specifically, her record as San Francisco District Attorney and California Attorney General is under scrutiny. While Harris has fought against such attacks and has refused to show much regret for her record, her newfound position of power as vice president role as the deciding vote in the Senate make it incredibly important to look back at the choices for which she's been criticized. Harris was elected district attorney of San Francisco in 2004 and initially got into hot water with the police department after refusing to seek the death penalty for a man who had shot an officer, an unpopular stance at the time for officers and senators alike. According to former member of the police commission, Peter Keene, the backlash Harris received significantly traumatized her. From then on, Harris often stayed silent on the topic of police misconduct in her district. According to Harris's chief of administration, she would tell her staff not to prosecute arrests that could have been a result of racial profiling. When Harris became the Attorney General of California, her failure as the self-described progressive prosecutor only continued. While California had one of the highest rates of police shootings in the country as reported by the SF Chronicle, the San Francisco Chronicle, Harris's office often refused to prosecute police shootings of unarmed people. She even opposed a bill that would have required her office to investigate officers involved in shootings. Additionally, she refused to support a state assembly bill that would have required police body cameras to be available to the public, a law that many say would further strengthen community police relations. So she got traumatized early on from being against the death penalty. And so after that, all of her votes were just super pro-police. That's what happened. So keep that in mind. She faced a lot of political pressure, and then she changed her stance in a complete 180. Just keep that in mind. Is that, somebody that you want to be, leading the country? They get some political pressure, and then all of a sudden they change their entire opinion on something. Maybe that's okay for you, but I'm just letting you know that that's who this person is. Harris's troublesome record goes beyond failing to hold the police accountable. During her tenure as DA, Harris was especially aggressive when it came to marijuana, prosecuting 1,900 people on marijuana charges, according to the Mercury News. This is all in spite of the fact that Harris, as a senator, claims to support the legalization of marijuana. Harris also participated in dangerous court procedural practices. In 2010, she failed to disclose to defendants in multiple cases that a technician at a San Francisco Police Department crime lab had tampered with several drug samples. Harris's mismanagement even impacted struggling parents and students. This is another big strike against her for a lot of people. In 2011, Harris co-sponsored and enforced a truancy law, which would charge parents with a misdemeanor if their children had missed at least 10% of school time. This law, which the burden mostly fell on women of color, according to NPR, was cruel and unjust and did not take into account any particular struggles that parents or students could be dealing with. Even worse, when Harris was questioned about this by Jake Tapper, the lead Washington anchor on CNN, she lied about what the law was intended to do. She described the arrests of parents as an unintended consequence of the law, in spite of the fact that during her inaugural address as Attorney General, she specifically stated her intent to prosecute those parents whose children had violated the truancy law. Instead of attempting to understand the plight of parents who were targeted by this law, Harris instead arrested them. The most egregious example of Harris's mismanagement, however, was her decision not to prosecute then One West Bank CEO Steve Mnuchin, who, according to the California Department of Justice, had committed foreclosure violations by forcing people out of their homes with little notice. The California Department of Justice, which is probably a big reason why you're seeing so many homeless people in California on top of the immigration issue. So these are both directly tied to Kamala Harris. The immigration issue, as well as all of those people who got kicked out of their homes by Steve Mnuchin illegally. The California Department of Justice even recommended that Harris file a civil enforcement action against One West Bank, yet she still declined. She had every obligation to prosecute Mnuchin and let him off scotch-free. So those are, the last thing. This is basically just, him closing out with his opinion. So that's all the facts of it. And I actually want to look this up as well. I want to see how much One West Bank specifically gave Kamala Harris's campaign. That'll tell us a lot. So, according to Counterpunch, coincidentally, before Harris passed on the opportunity to file action against One West Bank, one of its owners, prolific Democratic Party donor George Soros, was pouring money into California for California criminal policy initiatives. In 2011, Harris's former aide, Lenore Jackson, was hired as a campaign manager for Californians for Safety and Justice, which was financed by Soros's Open Society Foundations, reported the Los Angeles Times in 2014. The organization operates under the umbrella of a San Francisco-based nonprofit clearinghouse, which effectively shields its donor list and financial operations from public view, wrote the Los Angeles Times, citing that beginning in 2012, George Soros led a 4-year, $16 million campaign to change California criminal policy, which Kamala Harris was deeply involved with as California Attorney General. Harris's aide, Lenore Anderson, also headed another Soros-funded organization called VoteSafe. In 2014, Soros and hedge fund billionaire Paul Paulson sold One West Bank for $3.4 billion. In 2015, Soros maxed out a donation to Harris's Senate bid. Do you guys see what I see right there? To me, this is what I read into that. Looks to me that she didn't prosecute the CEO of One West Bank. At the same time, she was working closely with the owner of One West Bank, George Soros, and was getting funneled a bunch of money to work on these different initiatives in California. As a return, now this part is speculation, of course, can't prove it, but it looks to me that in return for not prosecuting the guy who made a certain portion of California's population homeless on purpose, illegally, and in return for not prosecuting that guy, it looks like she received a maximum donation from the owner of that bank a little after he sold it. So that is my complete breakdown of Kamala Harris's record. It's a mixed bag when it comes to domestic policy. I think she did some good things. I think she did some bad things. I think her healthcare record, pretty decent. Record, against prosecuting sex traffickers, really good. Record against, domestic abusers, good record. She has some really good votes. In the Senate, she had some not so good votes in the Senate. That's a pretty mixed bag. Her Senate voting record, I call that 50-50. She had really good votes and some not so good ones. Foreign policy, though, that's going to be a big issue for her because she's too similar to Donald Trump when it comes to foreign policy. They both want to keep Israel going. They both want to keep Ukraine going. So, I've been talking for an hour and 15 minutes. So, if you're still with me, that is my complete breakdown of Kamala Harris's record using as many different articles and, pieces that I could put together so I could hopefully paint a complete picture of who this person is. So with this information, I say do what you will. If everything that I just spoke on, you feel like that's a strong enough candidate to, do things differently than a Trump administration, then vote for her. If you feel like she's going to turn this country around and, make it a much better place and, if you feel that way still based on everything I just said, again, go ahead and vote for her. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for. I'm here to give you the facts about each candidate and you can make your own decision from there. So there you go. Again, next week, plan on doing the same thing with Donald Trump. And you're going to get the same type of breakdown from me when it comes to him. I'm going to be open and honest. I'm going to talk about the things that he did that I liked. Talk about the things he did that I didn't like. I'll let you come to your own conclusion. But until next time, this is Shane G. This is Politics as Usual. This is the Ethos Media Network. Till next time. Peace.